And we're back with Season 3, Episode 13, Magical Mystery Cure. There we go. I forgot to update over there. Sorry. I'm your host, the Lore Runner, and we are talking about the episode in which several spoilery things happen, including a sudden Cutie Mark artificial swap, which goes extremely badly, as you might imagine. Immediately then followed by Twilight Princess Sparkle. Twilight becoming Princess Twilight Sparkle. Sorry, I spent a little more time on this episode than I normally do because I had to do a little bit more research. Unfortunately, I was having trouble finding specific references to the original script. I found several references to the original script. What I did not find is said original script, which I was hoping for. So, whatever, I suppose. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think of this one before I jump into it? Because there's actually a lot to unpack here, and I mean a lot. We're going to have a lot to talk about. I have been told that this caused a bit of a division in the fandom. I, of course, would not know. Like, when did this episode go live? 2013? Yeah, I don't think I was even aware the show existed at this point in time. So. Yeah, singing. I decided to write down every song that's listed in the soundtrack. There are 7 songs in this. There's Life in Equestria, Behold Princess Twilight Sparkle, Celestia's Ballad, Morning in Ponyville, What My Cutie Mark Is Telling Me, I've Got to Find a Way, and A True True Friend. 7 songs. Granted, 2 of those are short ones, but wow. Now this is funny because I've gone on record several times as saying that Season 4 is an awesome season. We'll see, next week when we get there. But it's interesting to me that so many people are like, "Wah." I don't know, maybe I'm just one of those weird people who likes big status quo changes. In fact, I wish fiction did them more. At least properly. What is the best of both worlds episode of MLP? Oh, I have no idea. Every Discord episode. Okay. Mr. Red, you're asking me 2 questions. Question 1 is, what is the most popularly beloved episode of MLP? Which I don't know the answer to that question. The other question is, what is the episode that most significantly and drastically altered the status quo? In which case, it's basically this one, and the next 2 parts, which are effectively a 3-parter, by the way. And were designed to be a 3-parter, kind of. Let's talk about the behind-the-scenes thing first. Let's just get that out of the way. M.A. Larson wrote this. Shock. It was written to be a series finale. It was originally a 2-parter. If it had been so, it would have kept the overall format. So it'd been the 65th episode of the show. And it would have been there's a reason this episode... Oh yeah, speaking of which, I need to shove the continuity counter up a bunch. Because this episode constantly referenced previous things, which is something he was big on in general, but also this episode has tons of references to previous events. Like, a lot. Like, there's some of the more obvious ones, but there's also... where is it? I wrote several down here. They mention... Where is it? I wrote them down somewhere. Here we go. They mentioned so the fact that the elephants are specifically there because of the previous Discord episode. That's why the elements are in Twilight's room. There's also Discord's memory spell, which was mentioned, and the Cutie Pox cure, and the Eye Spark is back in Twilight. And the flashbacks obviously count. There's also the second flashback, now that I'm thinking about it. And I forgot about the sofas and quills and 7-hour bubble baths, so hang on, I need to add even more continuity counter stuff here, because it's just all over the place. So that brings us up to here. But that's on purpose. Again, this episode was supposed to be the series finale, so of course they tie in and reference a bunch of stuff. Most series finales do something like that. Duh. Obviously, this was supposed to be a 2-parter. The original episode, what was going to happen in the first episode was Celestia was going to send a large crate of magical artifacts and goods and saying, keep this for safe storage. And Twilight couldn't help herself. And was like, I must open it. And in so doing, she unleashes this magical torrent, which is what alters the Cutie Marks. By the way, I'm going to talk about the Cutie Marks last, or at least later. Either that or first. But either way, I'll move on in a second. Anyway, so that was supposed to happen, and Celestia would not be capable of fixing it. And thus, Twilight would have to learn how to fix this on her own, in so doing, proving herself to be worthy of the title and doing something that Star Swirl the Bearded couldn't do, and that Celestia couldn't do, thus earning the title of becoming a princess, which would have been the denouement. The second episode would have been the conclusion and the follow-through and all that stuff. That was the original structure. So I was smashed to the point where the actual dilemma of the episode is solved within 13 minutes, I counted. I'm not sure if I liked that or disliked it, but I remember the first time I watched this, and I didn't know about the series finale thing, and I remember being like, huh? Now, again, the first time I watched this was like 4 years ago, something like that. So by this point, you know, season 4 was already out, and I knew it was a thing, so I was just confused by this episode when I watched it. Learning about the behind-the-scenes stuff makes a lot of that make way more sense. Holy crap. I do agree that it feels a bit rushed, because it does. It feels like it's racing through. However, in its defense, I will say there's not a single moment of this episode that is wasted. So, you know, in my own terminology, I think the pacing is both good and bad, a positive and a negative. Because it's just sprinting through events, but it's very efficient about what it does and where. Every second of screen time is utilized, and it does some good stuff with all of them. Probably the only complaint I have about the entire episode is where they do the old trick of, oh no, something bad happened, cut to commercial. And I hate that trick. I mean, that trick doesn't even matter anymore. That trick has been invalidated by modern television design. But the reason that used to exist was to try and convince people to stick around after the advert break finished. If you missed it, in this episode, it's when they all beam together to beam Twilight, and all that's left is a scorch mark, and they're like, oh my gosh, cut to commercial. I hate that crap. That's just, you know. She's very efficient, SA2K. Princess Celestia's great idea. It's funny you mentioned that. I have a note about that. I'm going to send this incredible spell that, you know, was made by the expert in magic in the entire world. That is to say, let's actually be more clear about that. The expert in casting in the entire world. And he couldn't figure it out. We're going to send it to my student. See if she can figure it out. Let's see if that's anything. Good idea. I will say this. Well, no, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's rewind. Do you want me to talk about Cutie Marks now or later? Because I got a whole thing to unpack about that. And yes, I know, that's the book from the season premiere back in the Crystal Empire thing. Which I suppose qualifies as yet another continuity counter. So let's go ahead and just push that up another number. It's all over the place in this episode. I'm not even complaining. Let's talk about it later. Let's go through the episode proper first, then we'll leave the discussion for later. So, do you think... so the cold open, other than the song, no judgment, is actually a really good cold open for the same reason that the previous one does. It's one of those cold opens that mandates knowledge about the show to really work. Because we see Rarity, and she's casting, and then it zooms in on her cutie mark, and it's like, oh crap! And that doesn't mean anything to anybody unless you've already watched the show. And I know I keep pointing that out, but I'm going to keep doing that because I like a good cold open, and it's harder to design than it sounds. So, good work on that. Good work on immediately getting the audience's attention and getting them cued into what's going to be coming. No pun intended. So here's my first question for you guys. Do you think the spell affects everyone's memories except for the people in its proximity? Or do you think people are terrible? Think about it. Think about what happens in this episode. So their destinies, we'll talk about that later. Think about what happens to them. And yeah, most of Ponyville is just like, yeah, whatever. And it doesn't affect Applejack's family. Like, Applejack's family is totally cool with Pinkie Pie ruining the farm. And apparently no one in Ponyville has any problem with the fact that Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy is just terrible at humor. Or the fact that Rarity is just this thing. None of the other Pegasi try to fix the clouds. No one tries to resolve anything. They just go along with this as if this is the way things are, which only makes sense if their memories are altered, or if they're terrible. Take your pick. That's why I phrased the question that way. Yeah, Spike was probably close enough to the casting that he wasn't affected too. Because there's only two people who demonstrably are not affected by the memory thing. Twilight Princess. God, I'm screwing it up already. Twilight Sparkle and Spike. There's also evidence that their memories are altered. The biggest and most obvious piece of evidence there, other than the fact that they're all going along with it, is Rarity, who flat out says, I just had the weirdest dream. Actually, now that I think about it, Rainbow Dash also said, oh, God, where am I? What's been going on? Clearly having no real memory of what's been going on. Clearly just kind of... So, we do have demonstrable evidence of memory alteration, and of certain people being immune to the memory. So, that's my personal take on it, because otherwise, this is just kind of messed up. We do admittedly have the superhero thing going on a little bit, because the town becomes a hell of a mess, and everyone's just kind of cool with that. And by cool with it, I mean they just kind of live with it. Because it's their job. They're the superheroes. It's their job to fix things, right? That's how that works. Anyways. So, then things get solved. Like they just rocket through this episode. It's really funny. Here's the thing, though. I like two things about the solution. First, it's actually simultaneously non-magical and magical. Here's the thing. They need the actual element of harmony. You remember those were part of the spell, too. They even showed that when she was casting it originally. They need the actual element of harmony to be the, I guess the splint is the best analogy for that. Possible, Sierra Mike. So, you know, they needed something to literally affix them to their old memories. Splint's a bad word. Stitch. They needed something to stitch them back to their old memories and to the way they were actually supposed to be. But in addendum to that, that would not have worked if the actual friendship wasn't there. Literal friendship. What happens is she doesn't go to Fluttershy and say, no, you need to fix the animals. What she says is, you need to help Rainbow Dash. And it's Fluttershy's desire to help Rainbow Dash interacting with her, and then Rainbow Dash interacting with Rarity, and then Rarity interacting with Applejack. It's the actual connections that people have been making over the last 3 seasons that helps them to actually solve the problem, which I like that a lot. It's also an interesting order, and I think it's important because that order is brilliantly designed. So think about this for a second. So Rarity is too refined and elegant to do the hard, you know, how do I phrase this? She's not really a hard laborer. Let's call it what it is. So she's not really well suited to taking care of the clouds and the sky. She wants to do something with it. She wants to be creative with it. Rainbow Dash, of course, is entirely too coarse and rough in order to take care of the animals, right? And Fluttershy is, of course, far too demure, quiet, and elegant. Remember, even her sneezes are cute. So, Fluttershy is far too understated to be an entertainer, basically. I mean, think about that for a second. And how many of you... Okay, this is a bad example. I'll use speedrunning. There are plenty of speedrunners who are very, very good runners who are incredibly boring. Because they can't talk. You know, they can't present. They don't know how to be charismatic on camera. So they're just there kind of playing the game and don't pay attention to me. And the gameplay is excellent. So Fluttershy does not have the charisma, to put it bluntly as possible, and she's not much of an extrovert in order to be able to be an entertainer. Naturally, Pinkie Pie is the weird one here. Yeah, different skill sets. Pinkie Pie, of course, is entirely too, let's just call it what it is, chaotic, to do something as regimental as what is required to run a farm. Oh, she's organized. Actually, this one actually caught me for a bit, because I was like, Pinkie Pie is very organized, and very, very, you know, she's got incredible memory, and she takes her business very seriously. But the problem is, it is by its very nature dynamic. she's much better at improv than prep. Whereas something like running a farm, and this is speaking with a little bit of personal experience here, that requires very strict, very regimental, do this, check this, deal with this, move here, do this, check this, deal with this, move there, right? Different skill set again. And of course, this then leads to Applejack, who has no fashion sense whatsoever because all she's interested in is utility. And so naturally, she ends up being a terrible dressmaker because all she's interested is in dealing with that, right? In short, with the only one that stumbled me was Pinkie Pie to Applejack, but in short, almost all of them are, you can tell they're deliberately designed to make a flow of not fitting with the person they are trying to emulate. And you can't tell me that's not on purpose. This then leads, of course, to the recovery. Fluttershy to Rainbow Dash to Rarity to Applejack to Pinkie Pie. And, of course, Pinkie Pie ending makes perfect sense because they needed to have the chorus at the end. But I don't want to get into that. But that makes sense for its own reasons. And now... yeah, here's where I mentioned the memories thing. The issue is resolved within 13 minutes. Let's go ahead and talk about the problem. The thing that I was initially expecting to not like about this episode, but having gone through it with analysis mode, I think now I'm totally cool with it, so hear me out. Destiny. Now let me go ahead and say that I don't like Destiny. Like, as a concept, I mean, as a literary trope. I like it when people play with Destiny, mess around with it. KOTOR 1, There was this man who had this great power of destiny. The force was swirling around him, and so he marched up to the warlord and said, "Ha ha, I'm amazing." And so the warlord killed him and threw him into the engine, which caused the engine to explode, which caused the ship to be destroyed, killing the warlord and altering the fate and course of the system for centuries. Destiny! But in general, I don't like it when Destiny is written straight. Which is, this is your fate, is how that's usually portrayed. And I've been fighting against the idea that cutie marks are destiny the entire time I've been watching and analyzing this show. You guys know I talk constantly about the idea of the pattern, and the cutie marks being what they choose, not what is forced upon them. The big difference being the freedom of will quotient, excuse me. Having rewatched this episode, I don't think this is destiny. Now, I know what you're going to say. In the episode, they call it destiny multiple times. They use that word successively a number of times. In fact, I wrote this down just to get a word-for-word quote here. Twilight actually says, "They're not who they're meant to be." However, given the points that I've made across this show, I think I've already made an extremely strong case for the fact that what a cutie mark is who you choose to be, not what the universe has mandated you are. And again, the big difference, the huge variance between those two things is choice. Now, going through this episode, I have even more evidence in favor of that based on the way things are presented here. Because what's being presented here is that what they are when things have been altered from who they chose to be is wrong, basically. Hang on, I had a note about this, and I'm actually trying to find it. Here it is. Their talents, their place within the pattern, their place within how they have chosen and how they are, remains the same. Now, their memories are altered, right? And they think they need to be doing something else, but it doesn't work. Really, that's the only piece of evidence I have to prove to show that my side of that thing. Because they are still themselves, even though their memories have been altered. Which I know sounds like a strange comment, but there it is. Now, Chloe Light makes the comment of predestiny versus destiny, and I think that's splitting hairs at that point, but I will give you the point, because what they're talking about is clearly not destiny, capital D, as it is usually utilized. And I think that's demonstrable just within the episode. You'll also notice that it makes 100% sense that this is all just a mess, right? I was trying to think of some good other examples from other fiction. But what boils down to here is they forcibly alter the memories, probably, of basically everyone except for those within the blast radius, which is 2 people, Twilight and Spike. And both of them... I said this before, you can't force something to fit into the pattern, because by very nature, that's not how that works. Remember, the pattern is not the force. It's not some sentient or sapient entity with some kind of will or destiny or predetermined whatever going on. It's just math, right? I'm going to say this one more time because I feel like this needs to be repeated. If you have a 10-mile to the gallon car and you have 10 gallons in your car, you can go 100 miles. There's not a literal circle drawn into the ground 100 mile, in a 100-mile radius that you then cannot cross. And that's the pattern. The pattern is the resultant of the math involved, the resultant of how things fit. There's not literally a ditch that you go through and you just suddenly can't drive past it. No, you have run out of gas, right? And I think that's important to keep that distinction in mind, because that's why you can't force something onto the pattern. In fact, we'll be talking about this very same concept later, too, when it comes to Miss Glimmer. I'm actually looking forward to that episode a lot. Or those 2 episodes, I should say. But anyways, so we will also see there that, very minor spoilers, that she is also similarly incapable of forcing the pattern. What she does is force complacency, but the pattern remains unchanged. That is to say, people's desires and preferences and opinions don't really change. They are still themselves. They have just chosen for a temporary period of time to not be themselves. Muted. I like that word. That's a good way to put that. Now, we'll talk about that when we get there. I don't want to get spiraling off completely off topic, but I don't know how to put this into words. It makes so much sense to me that if the cutie marks are a reflection of who you have chosen to be and how you fit within the pattern, within the social structure and the magical structure of the world, then if you try to forcibly magically alter that, especially without doing it on purpose, with an incomplete spell, with no idea of the implications, it makes perfect sense that what would result is a mess. This then also ties in with the original idea of this episode. I know that's cheating to pull in author comments, but given the fact that this was originally supposed to be a massive catastrophe that even Celestia couldn't fix, this kind of ties into the whole everyone's memories are altered, and the whole pattern is now a mess because of the fact that you threw this spell into the equation. It's just, you throw a wrench into things, right? Because now the car, instead of having 10-gallon tank and 10 gallons of gas and a 10 mile per hour gallon, miles per gallon efficiency rating, all of a sudden has corn seed instead of gas. Right? It doesn't work. You have completely screwed with things. And thus everything is spiraling out of control in a rapid fashion. And yeah, it does show how powerful Twilight is, which is something they've hinted at several times before. Now, the thing that becomes questionable here is what would have happened if this wasn't fixed, especially given how quickly it was fixed. This is basically fixed within the course of a day at the absolute high end. So, given how badly things spiraled out of control in such a relatively short period of time, I honestly and legitimately think that if this was not fixed very quickly, this would have been basically an apocalypse-level event. Like, completely deconstructing the nature of how Equestria functions and just this massive cascading problem. My opinion, based on what we're seeing and based on what we theory-crafted here. Also, admittedly, because of the original intent, but like I said, it makes me wonder where they were going to go with this if, that was a full episode by itself. Instead, everything's resolved at the 13-minute mark. Whoop, inhaled. I hate having a cough when I have a headache, It just makes it worse. I actually don't have much else to say about the cutie marks themselves. I feel like I've made as much of a point as I can. Because the next thing I want to talk about is Celestia. But just to cut this off, if you want to believe that cutie marks are destiny, more power to you. You know, we can disagree on this. We can have discussions on this. But personally, I like to think of it the way I already have. And I don't know. For me, this episode codifies my theory about the pattern and about the choice aspect of cutie marks more than anything else. Actually, I was going to mention that too, Chloe Light. I actually wrote down the exact quote. You managed something even a great unicorn like Starscroll the Bearded was not able to do because he did not understand friendship like you do. Ha! Remember that. It's going to come up later. But yeah, I imagine considering Starscroll was such a stick in the mud, he probably was completely incapable of doing anything with this. We'll get back to him in like a few months. Now, the elements of harmony, I actually don't want to talk about those just yet, Sierra Mike, so can you do me a favor and remember that for next week? Because the elements of harmony are going to come up next week. And again, after that, in the middle of Season 4. But considering the elements of harmony are the result of the tree, which itself was the result of the original quartet, or sextet, septet? I don't know, whatever. I've always had the opinion, I don't have a lot of proof on this, that the elements of harmony are the result, not the source, basically. Now, they still obviously have an impact, but my point is, considering that they came from, rather than they originated, it makes me wonder how much of an impact their loss would actually have. Especially given what happens in the future. Yeah, no kidding, SA2K. Like I said, I'm hoping there's some memory alteration, because good God. Although, considering that Ponyville is like the best spot in Equestria, maybe that's relevant. What do you mean, Ruth? I'm sorry. But yeah, they're foci. That's a great way to put that, Chloe Light. They don't make what's there, they channel what's there. Basically, think of them as the opposite of the Infinity Stones, although even that's something that we'll see what happens going forwards, but moving on. Anyways. Looking at my notes, just make sure I didn't miss anything before we move on to the princess part. Yeah, if you're talking about the cutie marks being swapped, that happens in this episode. What caused it, at the very beginning of the episode, well, actually, before the episode started, Twilight gets a random spell from Celestia, which is from Starscroll the Bearded, which she casts, not knowing what it does, while in the presence of the elements of harmony. Boom, 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 dominoes fall over, bad things happen. So, I want to talk about Celestia briefly. Several people have already brought this up, but I just want to give my thoughts. Celestia has always been very sink or swim. Like, just super sink or swim, right? That's her approach. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that is clearly her approach. I also want to mention one other thing. I heard one person once theorize that Celestia had this all planned out. I disagree with that. And I want to explain what I mean by that. To me, Celestia is not someone who plans. To me, Celestia is someone who hopes. And that's the distinction. Because especially in fiction, someone who plans everything out is usually portrayed as some master manipulator, or someone who has this massive, this is how things will happen, and how things will line up, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's Celestia chess grandmaster kind of a thing. After this move will move here, and then he'll this, and he'll have to do this, which means I'll do this. No. I think Celestia is the kind of person who sits down at the chessboard and thinks, man, I hope that happens. And she hopes for it to happen, so she pushes events so those things happen. But it's not like she has everything all planned out in advance, right? My opinion. Apparently there's a future episode where she says that. I'll take your word on that. Because I don't remember that off the top of my head. Ugh. No, yeah, absolutely, SA2K. So, yeah, she's not Palpatine. That's a perfect way to put that. And I don't just mean in terms of evil. Palpatine has things planned out 50 moves in advance. Because that's kind of his shtick. Celestia has things planned out 1 move in advance. Hopefully. But yeah, at the beginning of Season 3, I talked about this, where Luna was clearly not happy with the idea of throwing Twilight after Sombra. And I think this helps to explain that idea. I think the idea of Celestia is be like, no, Twilight will be able to take care of it. How do you know that? Well, I don't. But I think she'll be able to take care of it. You're going to risk all this on the fact that you have faith in your student? Well, yeah, of course I am. And yeah, Luna is so much more pragmatic and practical, and I mean, you can kind of understand why. It then explains why the two disagree on so many elements. This is actually doubly funny because if you consider their jobs, which will be coming up in a future episode, Celestia's main job is to just kind of be there, be the figurehead and deal with things while putting on a front. Not really a lot of actual tangible practical work. Whereas Luna's job is to run through people's dreams all night long and constantly actually deal with things personally. Now, that's no judgment. As that episode shows, both jobs are very necessary and very difficult, but one of them is far more practical, and one of them is far more intangible, which kind of lines up with their personalities. Yeah, what else? That is a good one, Darth Tyron. I do agree that Twilight was uniquely suited to be someone who should have faith in her. That is to say, I'm saying that wrong. Some people, if you just have faith in them, it turns out pretty badly. I think real life shows that plenty. Like if I'm sure you can think of at least someone in your life who you have had faith in. You believed them or hoped they would do well, and they either completely took advantage of that or failed miserably. And I don't mean to get too real on that, so I'll just kind of drift away from that topic. But my point is that you need to know the kind of person who works best when you give them that faith, when you toss them into the water and hope they swim. Because some people that really does work well for. I'm going to go and be honest for a second. I'm one of those people. I'm the kind of person who I have been thrown to the wolves, thrown into the fire many times. And I have swum. Swam? Learned to swim? I have successfully continued breathing. Because I'm good at that. Because I'm that type of person. Not everyone is. I would like to think Celestia knew Twilight was this kind of person, because she has a lot of experience with her, and she was basically her mother. Her mother figure, her mentor, for how many years. So I don't think this is something that's idly done, personally. That's true, Glowy Light. But yes, SA2K, I do think that. At least a little bit. You'll also remember that Twilight, to go back to the beginning of Season 3 again, is Twilight was like, I don't know if I got this, and Celestia was repeatedly, you got this, you can do this. Remember that? It was a big scene, and Celestia was like overriding it. What if, no, you will. It was a good scene, and it kind of shows that mentality there. So anyway, she goes to heaven. It's actually called like the Celestial Realm or something like that. I forget. I meant to write it down, but then I couldn't actually find the note where I found that, so I'm an idiot. But anyways, point being, she goes up to the Celestial Realm, which I don't think we'll ever even see again. And this, if you were to ask me what I think that is, I would say that's probably a representation of the pattern itself. That what we were seeing was literally harmony in practical application. And that would help explain why she is so fundamentally altered by her trip there and by what happens to her there. Because Celestia herself probably doesn't actually do it to her. If anything, she might have unlocked it, but for the most part, I don't even think that. This is entering pure theory crafting here. But I don't think Celestia cast, Evolutionize 3 on Twilight. I think what happened is that Celestia made Twilight realize things, and so Twilight changed. My opinion. I don't know how to explain how this makes sense in my head, but the idea is that once Twilight became aware of the reality of what she could be, of what she is, or wanted to be, or chose to be, however you want to think of that, once it became something that she was thinking about and actively processing, that's when it came into being. Something about that just really lines up for me. You'll notice Celestia bothers to show her all these things from... No, Lord Harriman. All these things from her past and all the flashbacks, which probably qualifies as another continuity counter. Oh, I already gave that one, so we're okay. Do I think Twilight actually died from that spell? No. It could have been a form of reincarnation, but I don't think the entity, the intellect, the mentality of the individual ever ceased being. Yeah, this episode also proves Twilight could lead people into harmony, which is probably going to come up in the future. Anywho. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, also obvious things. Obvious Phoenix references. As I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to mention it again because it's a great quote. Starsfold the Bearded was not able to do it because he didn't understand friendship. So she's an alicorn now. She's a little bit taller. It's a subtle thing. I didn't notice it at first. She's a little bit taller. She has a longer horn, and she has wings. Cool. I'm with it. Status quo change. I'm with it. We'll see what they do with it. Pinkie Pie made me laugh again. Hang on a second. She had to take a drink so she could do the spit take. I'm sorry, that got a laugh out of me. And then, you know, they have the big, you know, obvious, hey, everything's awesome, and yeah, they're all loving and accepting, and it's all awesome. They all reacted like themselves. I agree with that. Celestia mentions that she's a princess now, and see, I don't see that as a bad thing, Sierra Mike, because that means you can crush those fools beneath your... So, sorry. Oh, no doubt, Savacom. Considering how the next episode starts, well, we'll talk about that next week, Savacom. But anyways, the words. Is there a book on a princess I should read? No. The Flutter Clone Singers? The who? Mother Merced? Yeah, I've been holding back on watching episodes in advance, which isn't hard to do because I don't have time to watch TV anyways, except when I'm going to bed. But I usually use that time to watch speedruns. Why isn't there a book about being a princess? Who would write it? Cadence. Okay, I'll give you that. Cadence might have written that. Because it's not Celestia. She's not the book writing type, and she's been kind of busy. That's not Luna. She was locked away. Anyways. Oh, you mean during the finale, Mother New South? She did have plenty of time in the moon while she was a nightmare. While she was nightmare infested. I do want to mention one line that actually got another laugh out of me. Are you crying? No, it's liquid pride. Completely different thing. And of course he's all emotional. He's always emotional. He's going to be emotional in the future too. The wedding episode. We'll get there. Shining Armor remains amusing. You can really tell this was supposed to be a series finale. Like, really, really can tell, in my opinion. The fact that this was then fleshed out... See you around, Seraphim. The fact that this was fleshed out into a 3-parter doesn't really bother me, and I happen to like the next 2 parts of this. But yeah, these 3 episodes, which are effectively a 3-parter, work really well for me. This is effectively the setup. Then we're going to have the new... So this is altering the status quo, establishing the new status quo, and then responding to the new status quo, which is a fairly typical 3-act structure there. And we're going to see exactly how this pays forward going forward. And yeah, this finale is basically the conclusion of this arc of MLP in general. I don't want to comment too much on about where it's going to go, so what I want to comment on is where it's been. There's certainly been some issues with the show up till now. But I think a lot of those issues, in my opinion, could be summarized by the phrase establishment. They're building up. You know, even, to use a weird analogy, as much as I love Fellowship of the Ring, Return of the King is always going to be better for me. But the reason why is because because of the strength of Fellowship of the Ring. The build-up allows for the payoff, right? So while I prefer to rewatch Return of the King, that's just because I already know all the build-up. I already know all the establishment. I already know everything they did to get the bones and the framework set up so that now they could make this amazing thing on top of it. And I think Season 1 through 3 of MLP is a lot of that. A lot of build-up, a lot of establishment, and a lot of structure. Which is amusing because it was never intended to go past this point. But in my opinion, and this is purely from memory, and I haven't seen the whole show, but in my opinion, this is the bedrock. This is what they then build the show off of, is these first 3 seasons. If you're paying attention, yeah, exactly. This is them becoming friends. But anyways, I could argue that this is probably the first episode they are truly friends in, ignoring the fact that one of the songs is called A True Friend. But I could apply this same concept to a lot of other shows, too. I'll use Star Trek, because I'm so familiar with it. In TNG, Season 1 through 3 were basically necessary for Best of Both Worlds, right? Best of Both Worlds and Season 4 and the follow-through on that wouldn't have had anywhere near the impact if not for Season 1 through 3 and all that they did to build up to that point. DS9 is another excellent example of this. And hang on, let me actually look something up really quick. Nope, yep, I'm right. I'm sorry, I just wanted to double check to make sure I was thinking of the right season of Deep Space Nine. But yeah, Season 3 of DS9 is the one that terminated with me hitting the wrong button. There we go. Yeah, with The Adversary, which is the thing that really pushed the Dominion to the forefront. And then Season 4 was originally going to be more of that, and then they ended up doing the Klingon thing. But the point remains, Season 4 would have had nowhere near the impact if not for Season 1 through 3. I could say the same damn thing about Enterprise, but I don't want to get too far off topic. The point being, I have enjoyed MLP Season 1 through 3. A lot of particularly good episodes. And if you guys will permit me, since we've kind of terminated an arc here, I wanted to share my own personal bests and worsts. And hear yours, if you guys were willing to share. I'm still debating where I want to put Magical Mystery here. So, some of you may or not be aware, I've been making a spreadsheet with each of the writers, and the episodes and the episode numbers, and my relative quality. I've been coloring them. From blue, green, yellow, orange, red, purple, in terms of worst to best. I've only had 2 blues, both of which are by Dave Polsky. Over a Barrel from Season 1, and Spike at Your Service from Season 3. I've also have several greens, Dragon Shy from Season 1, Too Many Pinkie Pies from Season 3, Wonderbolt's Academy from Season 3, Putting Your Hoof Down from Season 2, Owl's Well That Ends Well from Season 1, Ticketmaster, Bridal Gossip, Dog and Pony Show, and Last Roundup, mostly from Season 1. Secret of My Excess, that's wrong. No, that's right. I'm thinking of the wrong one. I always do that. So yeah, Secret of My Excess, Super Speedy Cider Squeezy 6000, and Swarm of the Century. All those are green. Below average. Not really a fan. Average episodes include Applebuck Season, Fall Weather Friends, Cutie Pox, Griffin the Brush Off, Winter Wrap-Up, Showstoppers, One Bad Apple, Apple Family Reunion, Baby Cakes, Feeling Pinky King, and The Game's Pony Play, as well as Stairmaster, and of course, Friendship is Magic, the original episode of the show. That leads us to the above average ones. So in no particular order, we have Just for Sidekicks, which was a good one, Sleepless in Ponyville, Ghostbusters. I should be mentioning some of these, I suppose. Yeah, this is just the first 3 seasons. I'm doing this as we go, Mother Merced. Call of the Cutie from Season 1. Party of One from Season 1. That was the Pinkie Pie episode, first good Pinkie Pie episode. We also had Look Before You Sleep, Suited for Success, Bird in the Hoof, Family Appreciation Day. That's the first one where they really did something with Granny Smith. Friend Indeed, haha. And Sonic Rainbow, which honestly I was expecting to dislike more, but was better than I thought when we ended up going back through it. Which leaves the really good episodes. So, Cutie Mark Chronicles, that's from Season 1. That's pretty much when the Cutie Mark Crusaders become a main thing. That was awesome. It's About Time. That's the one, the time loop episode with Twilight, which was really good, I thought. Ponyville Confidential, which was the paper one. Magic Duel, that's the one where Trixie came back, and we saw the return of that. The Best Night Ever, which was the end of Season 1. where they go to the Grand Galloping Gala. Mystery on the Friendship Express, which I probably don't have to explain which one that one is, but in case I have to, it's a Pinky-centric episode, which is all centered around the train, and who did do Dundat. Sisterhood Social, which was actually very heartwarming. That's the one where Rarity learns a bit about being a sister to her younger sister, Sweetie Belle. Yeah, I'm right. Read It and Weep. I don't actually remember which one that one is. Which one's Read It and Weep? Ah, that's the one where Rainbow Dash learns to be an egghead. That's actually the episode in which they introduced Daring Do, the Indiana Jones character. May the Best Pet Win, which is when they introduced Tank, and was just a good episode in general. Hearthwarming Eve, where they recreated the first Hearthwarming, and we got a lot of really excellent world building, which is why that one's so high for me. Dragon Quest, which I originally wasn't expecting to like, but then we went back through it, and I was actually impressed by how good it was. Because Dragon Quest is the one where Spike goes off to and meets the teenage dragons. There's some good stuff in that one. Keep Calm and Flutter On. That's the second Discord episode, enough said. It's the one where Discord they're trying to reform him with Fluttershy. Lesson 0, which is the one where Twilight freaks out because she doesn't think she have a lesson. Sweet and Elite, that's the one where Rarity tries to be part of the upper echelons of Canterlot society, and succeeds and fails. Hearts and Hooves Day, which I wasn't expecting to like as much as I was expecting. But that one was a really good one. That's the Valentine's Day episode where the Cutie Mark Crusaders try to hook up their brother and teacher. Canterlot Wedding Part 2, specifically, because Canterlot Wedding Part 1 kind of, nah. But Part 2 was actually really good, in my opinion. Did some really great stuff, especially with the villain and the changelings. The Crystal Empire, Part 1 and 2. I mean, we talked about that so much, about Sombra, about the Empire, about the nature of how it functioned, about how Cadence was being used there, about how their interaction with the Crystal Ponies. Lots of excellent world building, lots of fascinating stuff to talk about. You know, really good episode, which just leaves us with the absolute best, of which I only have 3. I only have 3 episodes that are purple at the very top of the list. And these are, in no particular order, The Return of Harmony, Part 1 and 2, aka the first Discord episode. Well, it's a bit of a cliche and typical at this point to like Discord. I am utterly unashamed to admit that I completely like Discord. He's got a great voice actor and he's a fascinating character. And they actually did some really great stuff in that episode. And it's not just Discord, but it was a really good showcasing of their friendship and the way they interact with each other, and the fact that they weren't friends. As I kept pointing out so many times, that was one of the biggest points, was that they weren't friends yet. They were acquaintances, buddies. They enjoyed hanging out, but they weren't actually real friends yet, which was a key point of that episode. And of course, it laid so many things going forward. Yeah, wife javelin. Tom. Poor Tom. For those of you who don't remember, that was the diamond. Number 2 of the episodes that are in the purple is Lunar Eclipsed. It's the Halloween episode. It's also the first Luna episode, Season 2, Episode 4. That's a really, really, really good episode. So much of what they did with Luna makes so much sense. And the social pariah nature of her, and how it was just an amazing character study of a fascinating character who doesn't get nearly enough screen time. And they did so much good, and they used all the characters properly to help showcase her and her connection to Twilight and the overall structure of the episode. It was really, 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 really good stuff. It is only surpassed by Season 2, Episode 22, Hurricane Fluttershy. That one got to me in ways that I wasn't even expecting it to. That's the episode in which Fluttershy has to deal with her own insecurities, fears, and anxieties of having been teased and mocked, and then has to try and deal with that while still contributing, and just... that was a really good episode. Damn, that was a good one. Which leaves us with this episode. I haven't rated this episode yet in the color scheme, and I'm still debating that. Now, I think I know what I want to give it, but I don't want... I almost don't want to do this because this is going to sound interesting and amusing. See, like I said, the spreadsheet I'm staring at right now is organized by author. Each column is a different author, and then it's chronologically after that. Which means I can see the kind of, general quality each given author is doing, at least in my opinion, obviously. So, for example, Megan McCarthy has a lot of reds, really good episodes. Only one below average episode. Dave Polsky has the only two blues, awful episodes I've ever covered, but he also has Keep Calm and Flutter On, and I imagine that'll be getting better going forwards. Meriwether Williams is all over the place. There's reds, greens, blue, yellow. It's all over the place. Charlotte Fullerton is almost entirely orange, so above average. Amy Keating Rogers is almost entirely green and yellow, so average and below average. M.A. Larson is green, orange, green, green, red, 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 purple, purple, purple. Maybe that's just where my tastes lie. I don't know. But I like a lot of Larson's episodes. Which, yes, I'm going to stop building this up. I'm going to go ahead and put Magical Mystery Cure as a purple. This is a really good episode, which hits a lot of good notes for me. It's a status quo changer. It's got good songs. It's got amazing continuity. It uses the characters properly. It actually made me laugh. It actually made me care. This is an excellent episode, in my opinion. Take it or leave it. I'm actually very curious to see how things are going to be going forwards from this point on, because holy crap. I've also been keeping track of the songs as we go through the series. It's getting to be a large list. I'm curious how that's going to be going forwards. So yeah, next week, what is next week? Hang on, let's go and shuffle over to Season 4 here, shall we? Ugh. So, we're not doing another stream today. Just to be clear about that. I don't know if I've said that out loud, but it deserves to be said because it's true. But we will be starting Season 4 next week. Give me 1 second, though. Here we go. Season 4, Episode 1, which is by Megan McCarthy. I'm trying to think if this is the episode. I think it is. Because then the next one's also by Megan McCarthy. Oh, yeah. That's right. The next 2 episodes are Discord episodes. I didn't think those were coming that quickly, but here we are. And then we hit Castlemania. Some people apparently don't like Castlemania? Question mark? I don't know. I've heard people say bad things about that one, so I guess we'll cover that when we get there. Then we have Daring Don't. That's probably going to be the first Dave Polsky episode that, I'm going to like, because that's a Dave Polsky episode, and that's the episode where Daring Do finally, is actually a character. And yeah, this is Season 4 is when we're going to start to seeing other authors a lot. I'm going to have to expand things quite a bit. I guess we'll have to see us here, Mike. Oh yeah, speaking of which, when we get to Season 4, which is next week, we're finally going to pull out this. Because this starts immediately after Castlemania, I do believe. I'm almost positive. Yep. The Journal of the Two Sisters, which comes in right after that. Yeah, there's the Shadow Pony, which they mentioned in Castlemania. So there you go. We will start referencing this when we get there. Yeah, Season 4 also introduces Maud, a.k.a. the character I most relate to. I'd call her my favorite pony, but that's... I don't know, Luna's kind of contesting that now. And Discord, obviously. But we'll be doing that next week. Right now, I have to play through Suikoden for the 3rd time. I'd like to sound more excited about that, but, I mean, God's sakes, I just did it twice in a row. The Lore Reloaded... Hang on, let me chop off the local recording.